Hey guys, Jason here for another video. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm pretty excited about it. Alex from Rad Titan has been asking me for some time now to go through a certain collection that I have that is not statues. And I didn't actually know if the Rad Titan audience would even be into it, but he says yes, 100%. So my shirt should be an indication of what we're going to look at today. Today we're going to go through my Masterpiece Transformers line. So, I'll give you a little glimpse of what it looks like. Anybody who saw my my room tour got a little taste of it as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through each one of these now and explain the company that makes them, and just give a little bit of history of each character. Alright, so just a very brief history of Masterpiece Transformers before we get into this here. Masterpiece Transformers started in 2003 with the very first MP1 mold, which was a different mold than this of Optimus Prime. This Optimus Prime is around 9.5 inches. I believe that the very first mold, the MP1, was closer to around 12 inches, so it was quite a bit larger. And basically, the Masterpiece Transformers line was one of Takara's first Transformers lines that was created for adult collectors. They're much larger than their Generation 1 or G1 toys, the ones that 80s kids remember. Even though, you know, I often used to get people come over and see some of these and say, oh, I had this Transformer when I was a kid. And I'd say, no, you didn't. I know you think you did, but your memory is kind of playing a trick on you. It's funny because when people see these, they think, oh yeah, this is what I had when I was a kid because I had Transformers and they looked like they did in the cartoons. But if you look back and you actually look at your Transformers, your Generation 1 Transformers from the 80s, they really actually looked nothing like they did in the cartoon. The cartoon took a lot of liberties and really sort of fleshed them out. The original toys were actually pretty basic. So anyways, Takara created MPO1 2003 and then realized, I think, that the size was maybe a little bit unsustainable. So shrunk the official size of them down a little bit to what you see here, and released in 2011 MP10, which ended up being it ended up sort of creating the standard for Masterpiece Transformers. MP10 was another Optimus Prime, not the one you see here. This is actually MP44, so this is the third mold of Optimus Prime, and with every iteration he gets more and more cartoon-like. So that's sort of been the trend of all the Masterpiece Transformers since their inception, is with each year they start to look even more and more cartoon-like, since that's what the market demanded. Collectors wanted to have toys or figures or whatever you want to call them that looked like what they remembered from the cartoons. So that's a little brief history of Masterpiece Transformers, and with that, let's get into Optimus Prime here. So, as mentioned, this Optimus Prime was created by Takara. There are a number of third-party groups who have stepped in and sort of filled the gaps of characters that Takara hasn't made, and that's actually a lot, because there are a number of Generation 1 Transformers, and some of these third-party groups actually have done a fantastic job, you know, arguably even better than Takara in a lot of ways. But this Optimus Prime is Takara. For those of you who don't know, Optimus Prime is the leader of the Autobots, who are the good guys in the Transformers universe. Optimus Prime turns into a giant tanker. That is his alt mode. And actually, this toy comes with this trailer here, which does open up and houses a little character called Wheelie, who's sort of another part of Optimus Prime. In any case, Optimus Prime, in his chest, houses something called the Matrix of Leadership. I'm not going to open it up and take it out right now because one of the other characters is holding it, which I'll show you later. But in any case, the Matrix of Leadership is sort of it's the source of all of the Prime's power, and there's only ever one Prime at a time. Each Prime, when he dies, passes on the Matrix of Leadership to the next Prime, and it essentially houses all of the years of wisdom and knowledge of the Transformers race, and also, like I said, is the source of immense power. So Optimus Prime obviously is one of the most powerful Transformers, even though his sort of his background is not one of a warrior like a number of the Decepticons. So moving on to this guy here. This is Jazz. Jazz transforms into a version of a 911 Porsche. He was super cool. Fun little fact about him. In the Generation 1 cartoon, he was voiced by Scatman Carruthers, who some of you might know from the movie The Shining. He was the cook who also had The Shining and was able to telepathically communicate with the kid in that movie, and then ends up near the end getting killed, unfortunately. But cool character, really cool voice. This is Bumblebee. I think most people know Bumblebee because of his recent movies. He was kind of sort of the relatable little Transformer in the early days. He's the one who befriended Spike, the human in the movie, so he was kind of like the bridge between these sort of massive robots and the humans, and was that kind of, again, relatable character. This is supposed to be Spike. He actually came with Bumblebee. This is Spike's girlfriend Carly, his dad Sparkplug, and his little buddy Chip Chase, a little genius. So moving along here, I should mention that this guy is not actually Takara. He is created by a company called Make Toys, I believe. So now moving on to, if we can get him in focus here, Cliff Jumper. Cliff Jumper turns into a little mini car. I don't remember exactly what the car is called. It was sort of like a highly stylized, warped version of a little race car or something. I should mention that if it's not already obvious, Bumblebee, his Generation 1 form, did turn into a little Volkswagen Bug. Anyways, Cliff Jumper was always cool. He was sort of impulsive in the cartoon, small but brave, and sometimes it got the Autobots in trouble. He would sort of try and take the Decepticons on by himself when he didn't have the ability to. So this guy's called Sunstreaker. Sunstreaker was always really cool. I always wanted him. I wanted his toy, but he was a little bit hard to get in his G1 form, so I never had him. But he turns into Lamborghini, and his personality was really funny in the cartoon, because I guess he turned into this yellow, flashy Lamborghini. He was really vain and was always worried about getting paint chips or scratching his paint, and really came across as super arrogant, which was kind of comedic. This is his twin brother, and his name's Sideswipe. And yeah, he was the much more level-headed one of the two, or at least more down to earth. This is a Takara Mold. This is, I don't remember the company that makes this guy, but he's actually not Takara. There is a Takara version of him, but I felt that these guys, I think it's Bad Cube, did a better version of this character than Takara did. Takara's mold's a little bit older now, so it didn't look as too inaccurate. This is Smokescreen. Smokescreen turned into, I don't remember if it was a Nissan 280 or a Datsun, but anyways, cool character. He was able to shoot smoke out of his tailpipe and sort of throw off pursuers, thus the name. This is Prowl. Prowl turned into the same car, whether it was a Datsun or Nissan, I don't remember now, but his version of it was a police car, as you can see, and he took on kind of a cool role in later comics. took on more of a authoritarian. I mean, it makes sense as he's a policeman, but more of a interesting, nuanced role in the comics. The comics really got into lore, as they often do, more than the cartoon did. This is Mirage. As you can see, he's turning half invisible. That was one of his powers, is he could become invisible. He turned into a F1 car, and this was one of my first Transformers as well, the G1 version of him. So I have a special place in my heart for this character. He is... Ocular Max maybe is the company that makes him, and Prowl is another Takara version. This is another Bad Cube mold. As you can see, he's a repaint of Sideswipe, as he was in the original G1, and his name is Red Alert, and he turns into kind of a Lamborghini as well, but with fire truck markings. So he was kind of like a fire vehicle, if you could call it that. I don't know. This is Ratchet. He turned into sort of a van, as you can tell by his chest plate, and he was kind of a mechanic fixer. That's why he has this wrench in his hand. Kind of a cool character. And oh shit, I just knocked one over. This is, you know, I don't remember his name right now. Outback? God, anyways, not a very memorable character, obviously, because I just can't remember his name. There's so many of these guys, it's hard for me to remember all of them. But, anyways, there you go. There he is. Trailbreaker, that's his name. This is Gears. Gears was a really fun character, actually. Another mini-bot, which were just kind of the smaller guys. He was always really grumpy in the cartoon. That was kind of his personality, always a pessimist. But there was one episode where they removed the chip in him, kind of his main personality chip, and he got really, like, overly happy and you know, happy-go-lucky, and it was kind of a funny episode. Yeah, that always endeared me to that character. This is Braun. Braun was a really cool character as well. Again, a mini-bot. He was definitely smaller than most of the larger Transformers, but he was extremely strong. He would often take on some of the biggest Decepticons, even though, you know, despite his size. This is Silver Streak. Sorry, this is Blue Streak, I should say. He is silver, but because of some sort of licensing issues, they weren't able to use the blue paint scheme that he was originally planned to have, so they called him Silver Streak. And he also turns into the Nissan or Datsun, whatever that mold is. Braun turns into sort of like a little Jeep, or a little, I don't know, some sort of a little truck like that. Gears turns into a different type of little truck. I don't really know what to call them, but that's basically the closest thing that I can explain them as little trucks. And Trailbreaker did turn into a full-size truck. And then we've got Hound. Hound was actually in the very first episodes, he was the one that was kind of befriended Spike. That role later, like I said, got taken over by Bumblebee. But he was also a sort of a relatable, likable character. Turns into a military Jeep. This is a Fans Toys figure. There is a Takara figure that's actually relatively new, but I actually like the Fans Toys version better. Fans Toys tends to still use a lot of what's called die cast, which is the metal parts of them, so it gives them a really nice heavy premium feel, whereas Takara tends to use a lot more plastic in their molds these days. Still really nice and really well articulated and highly detailed, but I do like that sort of premium feel that the die cast gives. This guy's also Takara, Fans Toys. I don't remember what gear, who makes Gears, to be honest, and same with Trailbreaker. I don't remember who makes them. Then we move on to Jetfire, or Skyfire as he's sometimes called, and this was my very first Fans Toys figure, and I absolutely love this figure. One of my favorite in my entire collection. His plastic just almost has a silky feel to it. It's super premium feeling. He's huge, as you can see, and he just looks so cartoon accurate. Skyfire was a really cool character because he was originally a Decepticon because he didn't understand that the Decepticons were the bad guys. He was friends with Starscream initially back on Cybertron. So when he comes to Earth, he meets up with Starscream, and Starscream tells him, "Hey, look, the Autobots are our enemies. You need to join with us." So he joins the Decepticons, then realizes later the error of his ways and rebrands himself as an Autobot and ends up becoming a formidable foe for the Decepticons. And also actually is one of the first Autobots to be able to fly, which is something interesting. See, the thing about the Autobots is that they, on Cybertron, all tended to be, they were bookkeepers, they were scientists, they were peaceful robots. And the Decepticons all tended to be military vehicles, or vehicles of war. And they legitimately thought that they were just being taken advantage of, just being used and sort of expendable in wars, and they decided to revolt against the ruling Transformers at the time. So because this happened, initially I think their cause was actually just, and Megatron sort of took over as their leader, but as is often the case in these types of revolutions, he got power hungry, and the Autobots sort of had to join forces all together, create a faction, and sort of fight back against the Decepticons. So a lot of them really they weren't trained for war, and they're much more fragile than the Decepticons were. So one of the reasons why most of them couldn't fly in the beginning so the whole point of this is that Jetfire joining the team really helped them combat the Decepticons in the air. That was a long-winded way of saying that. but anyways, Ironhide is sort of Optimus's second in command. He's a sort of a grizzled war vet. Kind of had a John Wayne accent in the cartoon, which was sort of funny. Was always a bit of a cowboy. Always had some story from a previous war, and was just an all-around tough character. Thus the name Ironhide. And he turns into a van as well, like Ratchet. And this guy is named Huffer. Huffer was a mini-bot. As you can see, he's pretty small. Turns into a little truck as well. But what's notable about him is that he actually hauled Optimus's trailer a number of times when Optimus Prime was damaged. So there you go. That's the first shelf of Autobots. Most of these guys were in the original Autobot ship that brought them to Earth, called the Ark. So they're kind of affectionately named the Ark crew. Alright, moving down to the first shelf of Decepticons. I need to apologize in advance, guys. There's a lot of dust on some of these. Unlike the statue collection that I have that I obsessively dust weekly, these guys haven't got a good dusting in a while. They were kind of stuck behind boxes because I was planning on moving, and that didn't happen. So again, I apologize if you see some dust on these guys. In any case, this is the Decepticon leader Megatron. This is a really, really nice version of him. The engineering that must go into these things to have something as cartoon accurate as this transform into something else is just fantastic. Megatron in his early days, his G1 days, turned into a gun, which in the cartoon would sometimes be wielded by some of his compatriots here. The explanation for that in the cartoon was that, the explanation was kind of retconned in later, that what was happening was something called mass shifting. So some select transformers could actually change their molecular density, and then in doing so get extremely large or extremely small, and lose or gain power accordingly. So when Megatron became a gun and obviously shrunk down like that, his firepower became extremely high, whereas some of the other Transformers, such as Astro Train here, who became as large as an actual shuttle and could carry other Transformers in him when he was transformed, lost a lot of energy when he did that. So anyways, really great character here. Really, really fantastic portrait on this guy. Now, Thundercracker is one of a 3 fighter jet team called the Seekers, and they were sort of one of Megatron's more formidable teams. This is Thundercracker, like I said. This is Skywarp. Interestingly, Skywarp, the G1 version of him, was one of my first Transformers. It might have actually been my very first Transformer. So, good memories of this guy. And then we all know Starscream, the sort of weaselly right-hand man of Megatron who is always trying to usurp the throne. I actually have him here in his coronation outfit, as it's called. During the G1 movie, he essentially tried to kill Megatron when he was heavily weakened by a fight with Optimus Prime, and then had a little coronation ceremony where he was going to crown himself the new leader of the Decepticons, and that didn't go so well for him. But anyways, I think the scene was cool, so I like that version of him. So here we have Soundwave. Soundwave was always a crowd favorite because he turned into a Walkman, and his sort of gimmick, besides having kind of a really cool robotic sounding voice, was that you could open him up and, oh shit. Anyways, you could open him up and his chest could house little tapes, and those tapes, like the one that just fell here, could transform themselves. So this is Laserbeak. This is his sort of spy reconnaissance character. Turns into a Condor, and like I said, turns into a tape that goes into his chest. This is Rumble, the more humanoid character that came out of his chest. His arms could turn into pile drivers and could create earthquakes. This is Ravage, who was always my favorite of the tapes. Turns into a Jaguar. Very cool. I got in trouble actually because when I was in grade 1 or something, I traded a brand new Transformer for a really beaten up version of him from a kid in my school. And when my mom found out, she gave me shit and made me go back and trade back. This is Frenzy, similar to Rumble. And this is Buzzsaw. So now we move on to the Insecticons. And the Insecticons were always really cool characters. They actually turned into robotic insects, as you can imagine by the name. And Shrapnel was the leader of them. Turned into some sort of a beetle with I don't remember what the type of beetle is. Both these guys actually turned into beetles, but different types. This is Bombshell, able to shoot little pellets out of here that rewire Transformers and make them into slaves of his. And this is Kickback, turns into a grasshopper. And they came with some Energon cubes. This is sort of fun. Energon was the sort of the lifeblood of Transformers. It was their sustenance, and the reason why the Autobots and the Decepticons left Cybertron and eventually ended up on Earth was because they were looking for new sources of Energon that they could extract from the planet they found, put it in these little cubes, and then take it back to Cybertron so that they could tip the scale into their favor for the war. So these 3 guys are affectionately called the Coneheads. They're another Seeker group that obviously look a little bit different with their sort of cone-shaped heads here. This is Dirge, Ramjet, and Thrust. And as you can see, they look a little bit different than my other Seekers because these are the kind of older Takara models, whereas these are all made by a company called Make Toys. I think the Make Toys ones look more cartoon accurate. That's why I have them out. But I do like a little bit of variety. That's why I keep these guys. There are Make Toys versions of them, but I like the Takara versions. I should mention that these guys are all Fans Toys. Takara. This character was called Nightbird, I believe. It was only in one episode. She was created by humans because humans wanted to show that they could create, advanced robotics as well. And of course, she ended up running amok and had to be subdued by the Autobots. Got a few other little more obscure tapes for Soundwave here. These two didn't even make it into the cartoon. I don't remember what their names are. I don't remember what that one's name is. It was only in one episode. And I think I didn't mention this little guy, Kremzeek, who was also in one episode. He was a little funny character that would run around and short circuit people, robots. So now we have Shockwave. Shockwave was sort of the loyal lieutenant for Megatron. He stayed in Cybertron most of the time and sort of ran the ship there while Megatron was off trying to find Energon. He was cool as well. He had a really interesting voice as well, and he transformed into a Cybertronian gun. This is Octane. I really don't remember much about this character. The only interesting thing about him is that he was a triple changer, so he's one of the few Transformers that could transform into 3 different modes. Robot, I believe he was like an oil tanker, and a plane. This character doesn't stand out much to me though, to be honest. He was maybe only in 1 or 2 episodes. This is made by Takara. I don't remember the company that made this. He's just not important enough to me. These 3 guys were really cool. So they are actually one character called Reflector, but these 3 robots basically share a mind, and when they transform, they do transform into one alt mode, which is a old school analog camera. So what was interesting about these guys in G1 is you could not buy them off the shelf, or him off the shelf. He was sort of a mail-away figure, which made him really rare and really hard to get. I didn't have him. I still don't have him, actually. I have an almost complete Generation 1 collection of the original toys, but this is one of the ones that I still don't have. So it's cool to have him as Masterpiece figures, and they're made by Fans Toys as well. And last but not least, we have Astro Train. Astro Train was a triple changer as well, but one that featured very prevalently in the cartoon. He often sort of transformed into his rocket mode and would transport a number of the Decepticons in him. And on his shoulder is another tape that showed up a little bit later. I believe he showed up in the movie, and his name is Ratbat. So that is the first shelf of Decepticons. Alright, and now we're moving up to some more Autobots. These guys were mostly Season 2, Season 3 Autobots. A lot of mini-bots here, which are just sort of the smaller, they were smaller toys, and they were just sort of usually grouped or called mini-bots. This is Windcharger, turned into a little red car. I believe this version of him is by X-Transbots. This little human character is named Raul. He was just in one episode. I think he was sort of a buddy of Trax here. And then we have Skids. He turns into a sort of a Japanese minivan type thing. I believe that's also by X-Transbots, this one. Sea Spray was a fun character, turned into a hovercraft, a little colorful hovercraft, and his voice was, it always sounded like he was talking underwater. It was kind of a funny little gimmick. This guy's name is Power Glide. He turned into sort of an old school plane maybe like a World War I era plane. And this little girl, I don't remember what her name was, but she ended up falling in love with him in one episode. Don't ask me. It's 80s cartoons for you. So this guy, he's called Beachcomber, and I really, really liked this character. He was interesting and unique among the characters because he really didn't like war. He just really was sort of like a more peaceful character, sort of in tune with nature. As you can see, he has these little birds sitting on his shoulders, kind of a fun little peripheral for him. But that was sort of his personality. Kind of laid back, spoke like a California surfer sort of, and just was like kind of a hippie at heart. This guy's called Outback. I don't remember much about him, to be honest, and I don't think he was sort of featured in many of the episodes. By the way, Beachcomber turned into a dune buggy, and I believe this is X-Transbots as well. Pipes as well is one of those characters that was just sort of like a palette swap of a more popular character. I think he was a palette swap of, I don't even remember now. But not that important in the show. So Cosmos was a funny character, and he was kind of fun. He turned into a UFO and would often be up in the atmosphere, sort of keeping an eye on things for the Autobots. I believe this is a little space virus that he picked up, and he ended up having to get some sort of an aerosol spray to get it off. So that's what that's referenced to. Fun little peripherals. This guy's name is Swerve. Again, a little mini bot that didn't really feature too prevalently in the cartoon, although he did get a little bit more popular in the IDW comic books later on. Now this guy, Hoist, was not notable in the TV show really, but he was again one of my first Transformers that my parents bought me, so I do have some sort of nostalgic feelings towards him. I can see the dust. Again, I really apologize for the dust on some of these guys. Grapple is a really nice looking figure. Not super highly focused on in the cartoon, although there were some episodes where he was featured a little bit more prevalently. But this figure is just really nice. This sort of represents a turning point for Takara when they started really nailing the tune accuracy of their masterpiece figures. Unfortunately, it also sort of was a time when they stopped using as much die-cast metal in their figures and got a little bit more plasticky. Maybe that was to offset the costs of the engineering of making these things look so great but still able to transform. So this guy's name is Warpath. He's one of the few Autobots that's actually a sort of a vehicle of war. And in the cartoon, he was a mini bot. He was relatively small like these guys, but this version of him, I don't remember the company that makes it, but they kind of made him a little bit more beefier and intimidating, which I kind of like. I do have a Fans Toys version of him that just was released that's much more tune accurate, but I like this guy because, like I said, he looks kind of beefy, like a tank that transforms into a robot would. But also, my girlfriend bought me this guy for my birthday, so I'm inclined to leave this guy out. This guy's name is Sandstorm. I really don't like the portrait on this version of him, and I just don't like him, and I don't really care about the character. He was a Autobot triple changer, which were relatively rare, but like really not featured much in the show. So I have no sort of feelings towards him whatsoever. He's probably my least favorite of all my masterpiece Transformers. This guy's named Inferno, another Takara release, as you can see, based on this mold here. But he turns into a fire truck, and he was a cool character as well. I really love this Takara mold, and I really like the portraits on these guys. This is Perceptor. Perceptor apparently was one of the early founders of Transformers. One of the Japanese founders says that this was his favorite character. Interestingly, he said that before he passed away. He's a very cool character. He's a scientist as well. He turns into a microscope. And this portrait actually was not the original portrait that this figure came with. I didn't like the original Fans Toys portrait, so I contacted somebody on eBay and they recast me a different portrait for him. So this is a little bit modified. And then finally on this shelf we have Trax turned into a blue Corvette, which was kind of cool because my dad had a blue Stingray Corvette when I was growing up. So this guy always sort of meant something to me because of that. And he's holding a little mini Ghetto Blaster in his hand, which is actually another one of the Autobots, which I will show you shortly. So that is the Mini-Bots shelf. They're not all Mini-Bots, but mostly. Alright, now moving on to the Transformers the movie era characters here. So something interesting that happened in the beginning of the Transformers movie is a lot of the original Transformers were actually killed off. A lot of the Autobots were killed off by Megatron and his Decepticons to make room for new toys. So, spoiler alert, but in a sort of battle to the death with Megatron, Prime ends up sustaining life-threatening injuries and dies and passes on the matrix of leadership, as you can see here, to this guy, Ultra Magnus. And Ultra Magnus takes on the role of leader reluctantly and ends up actually trying to unleash the power of the matrix at some point and gets killed. So that's what this is supposed to represent. I know it's kind of bleak, but I thought it'd be kind of funny to have him in that pose here. He turned into a kind of a car carrying truck. I don't know what those things are called, but when you're running down the when you're driving down the highway and you see these trucks hauling a bunch of new cars, that's what he became. And an interesting thing about him is his G1 toy was actually the sort of the truck piece of him was the same mold as Optimus Prime, and all these extra bits sort of you put on top of him almost like armor. So later in the lore, especially in the comic books, they wrote it in that he was actually a clone of Optimus Prime, but he was given all these sort of extra parts of armor because he didn't have the Matrix inside of him to keep him as strong as Optimus. So that's kind of cool. This character is Blur. A lot of these movie era characters were from Cybertron, and they hadn't taken on a Earth-based alt mode yet. So his alt mode was a Cybertronian little kind of hover vehicle, and he was voiced by the guy that actually did the Micro Machines commercials, for those of you who remember the Micro Machines commercials. So he spoke really, really fast and was actually one of the more annoying characters because of that, in my opinion. So now we have one of my favorite of the triple changers. This was an Autobot triple changer, and his name was Springer. And he was kind of a big, hefty triple changer character. He turned into a Cybertronian car, a helicopter, and a human, or not a human, but a robot. And his helicopter blades kind of came together and formed a giant sword. He was really cool. He was almost like a quarterback kind of character. And he was dating the only female of the Transformers at that time, which is this character, RC. A really cool character as well. She transformed into a more sleek, if you could say, feminine-looking Cybertronian vehicle. And she was a cool character. She was sort of a badass female character before that was something that was a thing. Her head, interestingly, you can see the sort of shape of her head there. She was loosely based on Princess Leia, and when you say that now, you can kind of see it there. These are both fans' toys. A lot of the movie the movie figures I have are fans' toys. Him as well. This was Takara. So now let's move on to Blaster. Blaster was sort of the Autobots' counterpart to Soundwave. Instead of turning into a Walkman, though, he turned into a big ghetto blaster. And I had him as a kid as well, and I really loved him. Like Soundwave, he had tapes that fit in his chest too. So we have Ramhorn, I believe his name was, and Steeljaw, and Rewind and Eject were the two sort of humanoid-looking tapes that went into him. He's cool. I think in the not in the cartoon, but in the comics, he was a DJ, which I guess is sort of appropriate. This version of him is by KFC, a company called KFC. So this is sort of the hero of the movie. He starts out in the movie as just sort of like a young upstart, kind of rash and impulsive young character who has quite a kind of a character arc in the story and sort of grows up. He's actually the one that ends up getting Optimus Prime killed because he tries to take on Megatron, and Megatron ends up taking him hostage and then blasts Optimus Prime. But interesting thing about him is you can't really tell, but in his design in the movie had kind of an interesting collar, and apparently the designers wanted him to look like Han Solo from Star Wars. So I guess whoever was designing the characters for the movie was a big Star Wars fan. And this is Cup. Cup was sort of the father figure, I guess, to Hot Rod. He was sort of an old, grizzled war veteran, always telling war stories, and just kind of like being a mentor to Hot Rod. He was a fun character, and this is a really great representation of him. I love that portrait by Fans Toys here. Really, really well done. Getting that little cigar in there as well. Very cool. So we've looked at the tapes. There are some other little characters here. They're called Target Masters. They showed up later in the season 4, which was the final season of Transformers. And essentially, without going into too much detail, there was an alien race on this planet that they find, and they sort of sign on to help the Autobots, but they need sort of shells that can actually allow them to fight the Decepticons. So some of the Autobots give up their guns, and those guns become transformable into robots, and then the aliens sort of go inside. Same thing happens with the Headmasters. The Headmasters are actually piloted by little aliens. And the final character here is Wheelie. Oh, I mentioned that the character in Optimus's trailer is named Wheelie. His name is Roller, actually. This is Wheelie. And Wheelie was a little tiny character that was kind of more annoying than anything else in the movie, but he was very, very small, and the Masterpiece versions of him I find are far too large. So this is actually a smaller version from another Hasbro line that's actually not Masterpiece at all, that I just sort of put in here because I think he scales well, and he looks good enough that you wouldn't really think that he's of lower quality. And then we have Spike, all grown up now by the time the movie came around, and his little boy Daniel. And now moving down to some of the baddies of the movie. Let's start with Galvatron here. He's sort of the main baddie. So Galvatron is essentially a reformatted Megatron. What happened is, in the movie, there is sort of the ultimate baddie, which is Unicron. And Unicron is a giant planet that eats other planets. The size of a planet, but it actually is a transformer as well. It transforms into a giant robot. So Megatron has been almost killed by Optimus Prime during their fight. He gets thrown out into space by Starscream because he's too weak to defend himself, and Starscream wants to usurp his power, as I mentioned. So he throws him out into space. He's sort of falling through space with some of the other badly damaged Decepticons, like some of the Seekers, and he runs into Unicron. And Unicron essentially gives him an option. He says, either you can join me and I will give you a new body, or you can die a horrible, painful death right now. And so he takes the former and gets reformatted into an even more powerful body, which is this Unicron body. Unicron still turns into a gun, but it's more of a Cybertronian gun, and I guess even more powerful. The reason he has the Matrix of Leadership around his neck is because he's actually the one that kills Ultra Magnus when Ultra Magnus is trying to unleash the power of it, and takes it and tries to unlock it himself, but he can't unlock it because he's not an Autobot and he's not the chosen one, so he just throws the thing around his neck like a piece of bling. So that's kind of fun. So let's move on to Cyclonus. Cyclonus is his sort of new right-hand man and a bit of a kind of a psychopath and a warmonger. He is the reformatted body of one of the Seekers. It's kind of up in the air as to which one became him. It's not clear in the show. And similarly, this guy, Scourge, is also a reformatted version of one of the Seekers. Again, unclear which one, but he leads sort of a team of ships that look exactly like him. I'll show you here. This is them. They're called the Sweeps. And yeah, that's Scourge. Kind of cool looking figures. Now this guy might look familiar. This is essentially Hot Rod, but this is Hot Rod once he sort of comes into his own, ends up trying to unlock the power of the Matrix, and does, thus discovering that he is the chosen one, and he becomes the next Prime. After Optimus Prime, he grows in size significantly and becomes Rodimus Prime. And this is what he looks like in that form. He actually leads the Autobots for the majority of the season 3 after the movie, but then fans, complained so much that they brought Optimus Prime back because nobody really liked the Rodimus Prime character, I guess. So here we have one of the Junkions from the Planet of Junk. Also from the movie. Interestingly, he was voiced by Eric Idle from Monty Python. So that's always fun. These guys were basically indestructible. They could have their arms and legs and heads ripped off, and they could put them all back because they were kind of like master mechanics. And they all transformed into bikes, and they would ride each other. And then that sounded weird, but you know what I mean. So basically, his alt mode is this, and this guy's alt mode is something like this. I don't remember what this specific one's name is, but he does also transform. And this is just Daniel in his dad Spike's exosuit, something that he learns how to pilot during the movie, and it allows him to transform into a bit of a car type thing as well. All right, now we move on to one of my favorite groups of Transformers, the Dinobots. So we've got Grimlock, the leader here. We've got Sludge. Grimlock turns into a T-Rex or Tyrannosaurus Rex. Sludge turns into a Brontosaurus. We've got Slag that turns into a Triceratops. And Snarl turns into a Stegosaurus. And then we have Swoop that turns into a pterodactyl. So the Dinobots have different backstories depending on whether or not you follow the cartoon or the comics. So in the comics, they were already on Cybertron. During the wars, during the Cybertronian wars, they were just sort of an elite group of mercenaries that the Autobots would call in when they were really in trouble. They were extremely powerful in their robot forms. They're already massive. I mean, if you look at them compared to the average size of an Autobot, They're huge. But not only that, but in their beast forms, obviously they weren't dinosaurs on Cybertron, but they were beasts of sort. And in their beast forms, they're almost indestructible. Their hide is so dense that they're really indestructible as beasts. So in the cartoon, though, Wheeljack here, who turns into a car, some sort of a sports car, but is kind of a tinkerer and a mad scientist and a mechanic, finds old dinosaur bones on Earth and is tired of getting his ass kicked by the Decepticons, because again, Autobots weren't made for war. They were just sort of reluctant heroes, whereas the Decepticons were all war vehicles, and they were constantly beating them. So he sees these bones of these giant beasts that had roamed the Earth, and decides to try and replicate these in robot form, so that he can sort of bolster the Autobot army with these behemoth soldiers. The funny thing in both the comics and the cartoon is that Grimlock here really values strength over everything else. So there are a few times where he thinks that he should be the leader of the Autobots just because he's the most powerful. And there's a couple times where Optimus Prime ends up actually beating him in a fight, and then he realizes, okay, you know what? Maybe Optimus is more powerful than I give him credit for. I will, I'll follow him for now. He does have some interesting character arcs as well, where he does learn from Optimus that there's more to leading than just being the most powerful. So he's kind of a nuanced character as far as Transformers go. So these two guys they don't really fit with the other Transformers, to be honest, because they're not necessarily from the G1 Air American cartoon. Star Saber here was in the Japanese continuity, which carried on beyond the fourth season that the American show had. But he really he took this form and he became much more interesting in the IDW comics. And this guy here, Drift, same deal, became more interesting in the IDW comics. Both really, really great figures, both by a company called Flame Toys, but again, don't really fit with the theme of everything else, but they just sort of, I thought they looked good on these shelves. These guys are all by Fans Toys. Really, really fantastic renditions of these characters. Extremely big, extremely heavy, really, really high quality stuff. And Wheeljack is by Takara. All right, now we're moving into some of the more obscure characters. These guys are mostly from season 4 of the cartoon, and season 4 was the Headmasters and Target Masters season. It was either 3 or 4 episodes, and that's all it was. And it was just sort of to kind of cap off the G1 story for the North American audiences. As I mentioned, in Japan, the story did keep going on. So anyways, this guy here, his name's Six Shot. He was really powerful, took on some of the bigger Autobots by himself and beat the shit out of a bunch of them. He could transform into 6 different vehicles, so he was unique. Or not even vehicles, 6 different forms. So he was unique in that way. So he would transform into a gun and kill one guy, and then transform into like some sort of like a armored vehicle and kill another one, then into a plane and fly away, and then rinse and repeat. Super tough character, and a really, really nice version of him from Fans Toys. I'm not sure if you can tell, but Fans Toys figures, unlike a lot of the other makers, have a really, really beautiful paint to them
that's almost like a flecked, like it's a little bit metallic in a way. It's hard to capture on camera, but these guys are all fans' toys, and they have that sort of really nice metallic-y flecked paint. Anyways, this guy here is named Mindwipe. He transforms into a giant bat. Kind of sounds like Count Dracula when he talks, and he's called Mindwipe because he can sort of hypnotize Autobots and wipe their mind or make them do what he wants. And this is another headmaster named Weird Wolf. Turns into a giant yellow wolf. Now we've got an Autobot Target Master. His name's Point Blank. And as I mentioned, the Target Masters, their guns transformed into little characters. So that's what this guy is. I don't remember what his name is. That dust is just terrible. So this guy's name is Hardhead. He is Autobot Headmaster. Then we've got Chrome Dome, who is an Autobot Headmaster. I don't remember a lot about these characters. Like I said, they were only in a few episodes in the last season of Transformers. But I do want to eventually have an entire collection of them just because I'm a completionist. I'm crazy like that. So these guys, Twin Twist and Topspin, the G1 toys actually had a little gimmick where you could pull them back and then let them go, and they would drive and then flip up and transform into robots on their own. They didn't really, I don't even think they were featured in the cartoon, but in the IDW comics, they certainly were featured a lot more prevalently. They're part of a little team of soldiers. Here's another little mini bot that came later in the show. I think his name was Tailpipe. And then this is basically, his name's Goldbug. He was when Bumblebee was sort of reformatted later, he became this character, Goldbug. And then moving down even further, it's kind of hard for me to even get in here, but two more Decepticon headmasters. This is Snapdragon, turns into a big kind of mechanized dragon. And this is Ape Face. Again, turns into a giant ape, as you can imagine. And both of their heads transform into little robots, like all the headmasters do. This guy's name is Bludgeon. He came far later in the toy line. He wasn't in the cartoon. He was what they call a pretender. So Hasbro and Takara were probably running out of ideas for Transformers toys, so they started taking Transformers and then putting like a shell of something else over top. Sometimes they looked like humans, sometimes they looked like animals, but his shell looked like this giant samurai guy. I don't think it was very successful, but someone along the lines realized that a giant robotic samurai is cool, and they started using him more in the lore. So that's why I have him, just because I think he's kind of a cool looking character, even though he wasn't in the cartoon. Again, I showed before, but here are the sweeps. And here's Nemesis Prime. Nemesis Prime was not in the cartoon, but featured in the comics as well. All these sort of comic-only characters are kind of tucked away in the corner here. But he's cool because he was essentially he was modeled after Optimus Prime. The Decepticons got the blueprints for Optimus Prime and made sort of an evil version of him, which is Nemesis Prime here. As you can see, this is the MP10 mold. It's a little bit blockier and a little bit more sort of primitive, not as refined as the newer Optimus Prime mold, but still a cool figure. And here are some of the Sharkticons from the movie. They're kind of fun characters. All right, so we're getting close to the end of the collection, but we're coming to some of my absolute favorite Transformers, which are the Combiners. They were giant Transformers that were essentially made up of a number of smaller Transformers. So really cool concept. I remember collecting all of the parts of this guy, Devastator, who was the first Combiner when I was a kid.
As you can see, he's made up of a whole bunch of construction vehicles, which each in their own right transform into robots, but when they all come together, they create Devastator. And Devastator showed up in the first season of the Transformers and really beat the shit out of the Autobots. He was sort of the ace in the hole for the Decepticons. As soon as the Autobots started getting a little bit of an upper hand in battles, they brought out Devastator, and he was absolutely massive and would just destroy the Autobots. In fact, the Autobots really didn't have any answer to Devastator until the Dinobots showed up on Earth. So that's Devastator. This is Bruticus. Bruticus was made up of a number of military vehicles, and he kind of has a funny origin story in the cartoon. In one of Starscream's attempts to take power from Megatron, he sends somebody back to Cybertron to pick up the personality chips of a bunch of criminals that are sort of in stasis in a jail in Cybertron, and he brings the personality chips to Earth, implants a bunch of military vehicles with them, and creates a combiner out of it, which is Bruticus, and basically has Bruticus take on Devastator, so that hopefully Starscream can sort of take out Megatron's best weapon. As you can imagine, it doesn't go the way he plans, though. So these guys are parts of the Stunticons. Eventually, they will combine to form Menasor, but I don't have all of them yet. Fans Toys hasn't released the other two characters, so for now I just have the individual characters. They transform into kind of race cars or stunt vehicles, and he's sort of the trailer that carries them all. Similarly, we have 3 of the aerial bots, which are the Autobots that eventually form Superion when they combine. But again, I only have 3. Again, Fans Toys, they've only released 3, so I'm waiting for the other 2 to be able to make Superion. Behind them, I have the absolutely amazing Fans Toys version of Omega Supreme. Omega Supreme is a really cool character in the continuity. He's one of what are called the Guardian robots from Cybertron. They were sort of there to protect Cybertron, but he was the elite of the Guardian robots. He's massive. He's an Autobot, but he really doesn't like fighting, so he tries to stay out of the sort of squabbles between the Autobots and Decepticons. Optimus Prime often goes to him for advice, because he is quite wise, and occasionally he will actually get into the fight, usually when it has to do with this guy, because him and the Constructicons have beef. They used to be friends, and then they backstabbed him. So basically all Optimus Prime has to do to get Omega Supreme in the fight is to mention that the Constructicons will be there, and he's all over it. So there are other combiner groups that I don't have yet, just because no group has released a true Masterpiece scale version of them yet. The Protectobots, for example, create Defensor, and there are some others as well. So hopefully eventually these guys will release all of them, but for now this is what I've got. To finish things off, we'll go up here. I can almost not reach, but I've got another Seeker set here. And these guys you only ever see in one episode. They're called the Rainmakers, because they essentially shoot stuff into the atmosphere on Cybertron that makes acid rain start to come down on the Autobots. Their individual names are Acid Storm, Ion Storm, and Nova Storm. And I actually painted this guy myself. As you can see, the sort of lightning. But they're not the best, so I just keep them up here. Now this, it's really hard to see, but he's quite big. He is actually the robot form of Cybertron. So Cybertron was initially able to transform into a robot, and his name was Primus. But he gave up his ability to transform so that he could essentially take his spirit and pass it on to the Autobot matrix of leadership. So he is stuck as Cybertron now. He can't transform anymore, but he originally was able to, and his name was Primus. And his brother turned evil, also turns into a planet, and that is, of course, Unicron, the original big baddie of the movie. I do have a much bigger version of Unicron coming, made by Hasbro, but it's not released yet. I don't know when that's going to be released, and I also don't know where I'm going to fit it. Okay, and last but not least, we have the Titan class Transformers. So these guys are obviously not to scale. These are supposed to be the size of cities. So not as badly to scale as the planet Transformers like Primus and Unicron. I mean, if they were going to be in scale with this stuff, they should be the size of an apartment building. But I mean, these guys are supposed to be the size of cities. In fact, Metroplex here is actually, he becomes Autobot City. So you can imagine they should be much larger. But that's okay. So this is Metroplex. Like I said, becomes Autobot City. None of these are actual Masterpiece Transformers. So they're a little bit more plasticky. I'm not sure if you can tell. Still well done, but not quite to the same level of quality as the Masterpiece ones. But I think this is as good as we're going to get for Titan class Transformers. These are created mostly from Takara Hasbro for some of their smaller, more casual Transformers lines. But like I said, they'll do. So Metroplex is pretty cool. Again, absolutely massive. His arch nemesis is Trypticon here. Also turns into a city, turns into a Decepticon city, but his other mode is not a robot. As you can see, it's kind of a Godzilla-like dinosaur. And something cool about him, the Generation 1, the G1 version of him that I had as a kid, actually, was you throw some batteries in him and flip a switch, and he actually would walk on his own. So that was a cool gimmick. This guy here is named Six Gun. He's actually just a little associate, we'll call him, of Metroplex, made up of a bunch of Metroplex's extra parts when he becomes a city. So now we move on to the Headmaster Titan class Transformers, Scorponok and Fort Max, or Fortress Maximus. Both of their heads actually do transform, well, at least the G1 versions of them, and in the cartoon they do. They transform into smaller Transformers, and those Transformers' heads actually transform into even smaller Transformers, believe it or not. So Scorponok, his alt mode is a giant scorpion, as I'm sure you can gather by his name. And I kind of threw these little fun Transformers on here just to get a better idea of scale. But I mean, even still, that's not to scale. Transformers would be, the regular Transformers would be way, way smaller. Next to these city bots. Again, Fortress Maximus seems to be having a little word here with mini Optimus Prime. So that's fun. So those are the Titan class Transformers. And I think that's pretty much it. I've got some little bobblehead Transformers here. And then I also, as you can see, collect the new G.I. Joe classified line. Trying to get a complete set of them, but they're hard to find because they're only distributed through certain places like Walmart. So anyways, thank you very much for sticking through this video. I'm sure it's going to be a long one, and it gets pretty deep into the Transformers nerd lore. But yeah, thanks for watching, and have a good one.